He demanded my family's treasures. I saw his kids sneak into my garage. They tried to burn everything, and his last words shook me. I'd just moved into my grandmother's old house in Willow Creek, a quiet little town in Ohio. The place was a two-story Victorian, creaky but full of charm, with faded wallpaper and a porch that sagged like it was tired. Grandma left it to my dad, but after he died in a car accident 3 days after her, the house came to me. It wasn't just a house, it was a treasure chest of memories, packed with her old photos, letters, and a locket that had been in our family for generations. I felt her presence in every room, and I was determined to honor her legacy. The day I pulled up with my moving boxes, I noticed my neighbor, James, watching from his yard across the street. He was tall, with a fake friendly grin that didn't reach his eyes. His 2 kids, Ethan and Lily, were playing nearby, kicking a soccer ball into my driveway. I waved, trying to be polite. Big mistake. Not even an hour after I'd unpacked my first box, James was at my door, his kids trailing behind like they owned the place. He didn't even say hello, just launched into questions about my grandma's will. "So, Emma, what did she leave you? I heard she had some valuable stuff." His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp, like he was sizing me up. I was stunned. Who asks that? I mumbled something about settling in and not having time to talk, but James pushed, saying his kids were like grandkids to my grandma, that they deserved something to remember her by. I almost laughed. Grandma barely tolerated them. Their dog had ruined her garden, and they'd never so much as brought her a casserole. I told him the will was private, hoping he'd take the hint. He didn't. His smile tightened, and he said, "We'll talk more later." As he walked away, Ethan shot me a glare, and Lily smirked. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just nosiness. Something about James felt wrong, and I had a sinking feeling this was only the beginning. The next morning, I was still unpacking when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find James standing there, his kids Ethan and Lily behind him, all 3 looking way too comfortable on my porch. James had that same creepy grin, like he was selling me something I didn't want. "Morning, Emma," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "We need to talk about your grandma's stuff." My jaw dropped. I hadn't even had my coffee yet, and this guy was back, acting like he had a right to my family's heirlooms. Before I could respond, he launched into a speech about how his kids loved my grandma, how they'd spent countless hours with her. It was total nonsense. Grandma had complained about them constantly, Ethan leaving his bike in her driveway, Lily tossing candy wrappers in her yard. I tried to stay calm, saying, "James, the will's clear. Her things stay with family." His eyes narrowed, but he kept smiling. "My kids were like family to her," he insisted. "They deserve something special, like that locket she always wore." That's when Lily piped up, pointing at a box I'd left open in the living room. "Is that it?" she asked, her voice sharp. Before I could stop her, she darted past me, grabbed the locket, and held it up like it was hers. My heart raced. That locket had been my great-grandmother's, passed down to Grandma, meant for my aunt. "Put it down," I snapped, my voice shaking. Lily just smirked, dangling it in front of Ethan, who giggled like it was a game. James didn't move, just watched, his grin wider now. I stepped toward Lily, holding out my hand. "Give it back, now." She rolled her eyes but didn't budge. James finally spoke, his tone patronizing. "Come on, Emma, it's just a locket. Let her have a little fun." "Fun?" I was livid. "This isn't a toy," I said, my voice rising. "It's my family's, not yours," Ethan whined. "But Grandma loved us." I couldn't hold back anymore. "She didn't love you," I shot back. "She couldn't stand you or your dog crapping on her lawn." The words hung in the air. Lily's face turned red, and she tossed the locket onto the couch like it was trash. James's smile vanished. He stepped closer, his voice low. "You're making a big mistake, Emma. We'll get what's ours." I pointed to the door. "Get out, all of you." Lily stomped out, Ethan trailing her, but James lingered, his eyes locked on mine. "This isn't over," he said, then turned and left. I slammed the door, my hands shaking. I felt violated, like they'd already stolen something just by stepping into my space. As I picked up the locket, its cold metal against my palm, I knew James wasn't going to stop. This was only the beginning of his entitled crusade, and I wasn't sure how far he'd go. The days after James's visit were anything but peaceful. I was still reeling from his audacity, trying to focus on unpacking and making Grandma's house my own. But James had other plans. He started showing up unannounced, always with some flimsy excuse. One day, it was to check if my mailbox was full. Another, he claimed his kids missed Grandma and wanted to honor her memory. Each time, he'd steer the conversation back to her will, dropping hints about how his kids deserved a piece of her legacy. It was maddening. I'd shut him down, but his smug grin never wavered, like he knew something I didn't. One evening, after a long day sorting through Grandma's old recipe books, I noticed something off. A drawer in the living room where I kept her letters was slightly ajar. I could have sworn I'd closed it tight. My stomach churned as I checked the house. Nothing was missing, but things felt touched. A photo frame on the mantel was crooked. A jewelry box in the hallway was open. My skin crawled. I had no proof, but I knew James or his kids had been inside. They lived right across the street, always watching. I started locking every door and window, even during the day. A few nights later, James showed up with a box of donuts, his grin wider than ever. "Thought we could have a neighborly chat," he said, holding them out like a peace offering. My patience was gone. "I don't want your donuts, James," I snapped. "I want you to leave me alone." His smile didn't budge. He launched into a sob story about how Lily cried herself to sleep, heartbroken, over not having something of Grandma's. It was pure manipulation. I knew Grandma had barely spoken to his kids. "She didn't owe you anything," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Stop acting like you're entitled to my family's stuff." James's eyes darkened, but he kept up the act. "You're being selfish, Emma. Those kids loved her." I laughed, bitter and loud. "Loved her? They trashed her garden and never even said hello." I stepped past him, leaving the donuts on the porch. "Stay off my property." He stood there, there, silent, as I slammed the door. Through the window, I saw him linger, staring at the house like he was plotting something. My heart pounded. This wasn't just annoying anymore, it was creepy. The next morning, I found more signs of tampering. A window in the back was unlocked, one I knew I'd secured. My pulse raced as I checked the house again. Nothing was gone, but the feeling of violation was overwhelming. James was testing me, pushing boundaries, and I was done playing nice. I called a locksmith to install deadbolts and started pricing out security cameras. I wasn't going to let him scare me out of my own home. His visits didn't stop. If anything, they got bolder. He'd knock late at night, claiming he saw a strange car in my driveway or heard a noise from my yard. Each time he'd bring up the locket or some other heirloom, saying his kids needed closure. I stopped answering the door, but I could feel his eyes on the house. Ethan and Lily started hanging around my yard, kicking balls against my fence or accidentally tossing toys onto my porch. It was like they were marking their territory. My anger boiled over, but so did my fear. James wasn't just entitled, he was relentless. I knew he'd try something bigger soon, and I had to be ready. Every creak in the house made me jump, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was already one step ahead. I couldn't sleep anymore, not with James and his kids lurking like vultures. Every noise outside my window in Willow Creek sent my heart racing. I'd installed new deadbolts, but it wasn't enough. The feeling of being watched clung to me like damp air. One humid evening, after another long day sorting through Grandma's things, I came home to a sight that made my blood run cold. There, at my back door, was Ethan, James's son, hunched over with a screwdriver, scratching at the lock. James stood a few feet away, arms crossed, whispering instructions like some twisted coach. Lily was there too, leaning against the fence, scrolling on her phone like this was just another Tuesday. I froze, my keys digging into my palm. For a split second, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Were they seriously trying to break into my house? My shock turned to rage, and I stormed toward them, shouting, "What the hell are you doing?" Ethan jumped, the screwdriver clattering to the ground. Lily glanced up, rolling her eyes, but James just turned, his face sliding into that infuriating fake smile. "Whoa, Emma, calm down," he said, hands raised like I was the one overreacting. "It's not what it looks like. Your door looked jammed, so we were just helping out." "Helping out?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Helping? You're teaching your kid to pick my lock." I pointed at the screwdriver, my voice shaking with fury. Ethan shrank back, his eyes wide, but James didn't flinch. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said, his tone smooth as oil. "We're neighbors. We look out for each other." I stepped closer, my hands clenched. "You're not my neighbor, James. You're a thief. Get off my property or I'm calling the cops." Lily snorted, muttering, "Chill, lady." But James's smile faltered just for a second before snapping back into place. "No need for that," he said, gesturing to his kids. "We're leaving. Just a misunderstanding." Ethan grabbed the screwdriver and Lily pushed off the fence, sauntering after her dad like I'd inconvenienced her. As they walked away, James called over his shoulder, "You should be more careful with that door, Emma. Never know who might get in." My stomach twisted. That wasn't a neighborly tip, it was a threat. I stood there, heart pounding, watching them disappear into their house across the street. My hands shook as I checked the door. The lock was scratched, tiny metal shavings glinting in the porch light. They'd been so close to getting in. I felt violated, like my home wasn't mine anymore. That night, I barely slept, jumping at every creak, imagining James sneaking back. By morning, I'd had enough. I drove to a hardware store and bought a full security system, cameras, motion sensors, the works. If James tried anything again, I'd have proof. Installing the cameras took all day, but it gave me a sliver of peace. I positioned one at the back door, another covering the front porch, and a third in the garage where I stored Grandma's most precious things. I tested them, watching the grainy feed on my phone, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny bit of control. But the unease didn't go away. James's words echoed in my head. Never know who might get in. He wasn't just bold, he was dangerous. I started keeping a baseball bat by my bed, just in case. A few days later, I caught Ethan in my yard again, tossing a frisbee accidentally onto my porch. I stormed outside, bat in hand, and yelled, "Stay off my property!" He smirked, grabbed the frisbee, and ran back to James, who was watching from his driveway. That grin of his was back, like he was enjoying this. I wanted to scream. How could someone be so entitled, so shameless? I checked the camera footage that night, half expecting to see him sneaking around again. Nothing yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time. James wasn't going to stop until he got what he thought he deserved, and I was ready to fight for what was mine. The cameras gave me some peace, but not for long. I was still on edge, jumping at every shadow in my Willow Creek home. A week after catching James and his kids at my back door, I decided to tackle the garage. I'd been storing Grandma's things there, boxes of old photos, letters, and some jewelry she'd left me, including a sapphire brooch meant for my cousin. I wasn't ready to sort through it all, but I needed to make sure everything was safe. As I opened the garage door, my heart sank. Several boxes were missing. The neatly stacked pile I'd left was a mess, and the corner where I'd kept Grandma's most sentimental items was empty. I stood there, my breath catching in my throat. Her photo albums, the ones with pictures of her wedding, my dad as a kid, her parents, they were gone. So was the brooch and a small silver music box she'd loved. My knees felt weak. Those weren't just things, they were pieces of my family. Irreplaceable. I knew it was James. Who else would target those exact boxes? He'd been obsessed with Grandma's valuables since day one. My anger boiled over, but a cold dread settled in. He'd been in my garage. He'd crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I called the police, my hands shaking as I dialed. 2 officers came, took my statement, and looked around the garage. "No signs of forced entry," one said, jotting notes. "Any idea who might have done this?" I told them about James, his demands, the lock-picking incident, his creepy obsession with my grandma's stuff. They nodded but said without proof. There wasn't much they could do. File a report, they advised. Keep an eye out. I wanted to scream. A report? That was it? I felt helpless, like James was laughing at me from across the street. That afternoon, I marched over to his house, my blood still hot. He was in his driveway, washing his car, that smug grin plastered on his face. James, I said, my voice sharp. Where's my stuff? He didn't even blink. What stuff, Emma? He asked, all innocent. I know you took it, I snapped. The photos, the jewelry, give them back. He chuckled, shaking his head. You're paranoid. Maybe one of your movers took it. Ever think of that? I stepped closer, my fists clenched. Don't lie to me. You're the only one who knew those things were there. No random thief would skip the TV and take old photos. His grin widened, like he was enjoying this. Sorry for your loss, Emma, but I didn't touch anything. His voice was smooth, mocking. I wanted to wipe that smile off his face, but I knew I'd get nowhere. I'll pay you, I said, my voice breaking. Just give me the photos. You can keep the rest, but I need those pictures of my grandma. His eyes flickered like he was weighing his options, but he just shrugged. Wish I could help, he said, turning back to his car. Maybe check the pawn shops. I walked away, my chest tight with rage and grief. He was lying, I could feel it. Back home, I checked the camera footage, hoping I'd missed something. Nothing showed in the garage, but I realized I hadn't covered every angle. I cursed myself for not installing more cameras sooner. That night, I barely slept, haunted by the thought of Grandma's photos gone forever. I kept seeing James's grin, his kids' sneers. They thought they could take whatever they wanted, and I was done letting them. I reported the theft to the police again, but it felt pointless. Still, I wasn't giving up. I ordered more cameras, ones with night vision, and set them up around the garage. If James came back, I'd catch him. I wasn't just fighting for Grandma's things anymore. I was fighting for my home, my peace, and the right to feel safe. James had pushed me too far, and I was ready to push back. The new cameras were my last hope. I'd spent hours setting them up around the garage in my Willow Creek home, making sure every angle was covered. I couldn't let James get away with stealing Grandma's things, her photos, her brooch, her music box. The loss gnawed at me, but the thought of his smug grin made my blood boil. I checked the camera feed obsessively, my phone never leaving my hand. For a few days, nothing happened. James kept his distance. His kids stopped loitering in my yard, and I almost dared to hope he'd given up, but I knew better. He was too entitled, too obsessed with what he thought he deserved. Then, late one night, my phone pinged with a motion alert. My heart raced as I opened the camera app. There, in grainy night vision, was James, creeping along the side of my garage with Ethan and Lily in tow. My stomach churned. Ethan carried a flashlight, its beam darting across the boxes I'd reorganized. Lily held a bag, glancing nervously over her shoulder. James was directing them, pointing at specific boxes like he knew exactly what he wanted. I watched, frozen, as they pried open a box and pulled out one of Grandma's old photo albums. My rage flared when I saw James hand it to Ethan, who tossed it into the bag like it was nothing. But then it got worse. James grabbed a can from his pocket lighter fluid, I realized, and started splashing it over a pile of boxes. My breath caught. Were they going to burn my family's memories? I couldn't wait another second. I grabbed my phone, called 911, and whispered urgently, "Someone's breaking into my garage. I have it on camera. Please hurry." The dispatcher told me to stay safe and that officers were on the way. I stood by the window, heart pounding, watching the live feed as James lit a match. My chest tightened. If they burned those boxes, I'd lose everything left of Grandma. The police arrived faster than I expected, their lights flashing silently in the night. I met them at the door, showing them the footage on my phone. "That's them," I said, my voice shaking. "They're stealing my stuff and trying to burn it." The officers moved quickly, catching James and his kids before they could light the fire. Ethan dropped the bag, and Lily screamed, but James just stood there, that infuriating smile back on his face. "It's a misunderstanding," he started, but the officer cut him off, cuffing him as he read his rights. I watched from my porch as they searched the bag. There were Grandma's photos, the brooch, even the music box things I thought I'd lost forever. My knees buckled with relief, but the anger didn't fade. James had the nerve to yell, "This house should have been mine. You don't deserve it, Emma," as they shoved him into the squad car. Ethan and Lily huddled together, looking scared for the first time. I almost felt bad for them, but then I remembered their smirks, their part in this. They weren't innocent. They'd been raised to think they could take whatever they wanted. The police took my statement, promising to return the recovered items after processing. They charged James with burglary, vandalism, and attempted arson. With his wife long gone, Ethan and Lily were taken by social services. My heart twisted at that. They were just kids, caught up in their dad's twisted sense of entitlement. But I couldn't save them from the consequences of his actions. As the police drove away, I stood in the quiet, the weight of the past weeks pressing down on me. James was gone, but the violation lingered. My home felt tainted, like his greed had seeped into the walls. I checked the cameras again, saving every second of the footage. It was proof not just for the police, but for me. I'd fought back, protected what was mine. Still, as I held Grandma's recovered photo album, tears stung my eyes. These were the last pieces of her, and James had nearly destroyed them. I wasn't sure if I'd ever feel safe here again, but one thing was clear. I wasn't letting anyone take my family's legacy from me. Not now, not ever. The police returned most of Grandma's things a few days later. I sat on the living room floor of my Willow Creek home, cradling her photo album, the sapphire brooch, and the silver music box. Each item felt like a piece of her, a tether to my family's past. The photos were creased from James's rough handling, but they were still there, her smile, her wedding day, my dad as a boy. I traced my finger over her face, my chest tight with relief and lingering anger. James was behind bars, charged with burglary and attempted arson. His kids, Ethan and Lily, were in foster care, their lives upended by his greed. The neighborhood was quiet now, the kind of quiet I hadn't felt since I moved in. I should have been happy, but the victory felt hollow. James's entitlement had torn through my life like a storm. He'd seen my home, my family's legacy, as something he could claim, like it was his right. I kept replaying his smug grin, his kids' sneers, the way they'd tried to burn my memories. It made my skin crawl. I'd fought back, protected what was mine, but the cost was heavy. My sense of safety was gone. Every creak in the house made me check the cameras, half expecting to see James lurking again. I thought about Ethan and Lily a lot. They were just kids, molded by their dad's twisted logic. I wondered if I could have done something, talked to them, reached out, but they'd been part of his schemes, breaking into my garage, tossing grandma's things like trash. I felt a pang of guilt, but I couldn't take them in. Their path was set by James's choices, not mine. Still, I hoped they'd find a better home, someone to show them what family really meant. The cameras stayed up, their red lights blinking in the dark. I added more locks, even a motion sensor light that flooded the yard at night. My home was mine again, but it didn't feel like it used to. Grandma's house was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place to heal after losing her and dad. Instead, it had been a battlefield. I sat on the porch one evening, the music box playing its soft, familiar tune. I thought about selling the place, starting fresh somewhere else, but that felt like letting James win, letting his greed chase me away. So I stayed. I hung Grandma's photos on the walls, polished the brooch, and wound the music box every night. I was reclaiming this house piece by piece. James had tried to steal my family's legacy, but he'd failed. I'd fought for it, and I'd won. The weight on my shoulders lifted, just a little, as I looked out at the quiet street. Willow Creek was my home now, and no one, not James, not anyone would take that from me. I closed my eyes, letting the music box's melody wash over me. It was over. I could finally breathe.